Hey guys, this is Dan from learningcameras.com, and here I've got the brand new 35mm f2 IS from Canon. Now, when you first pick this lens up, let's say a couple things. This lens is kind of an interesting lens. Canon has chosen to redo its 35mm. It's only an f2. It's not a very wide aperture. It's better than what Canon did with the 24mm and 28mm lens that just came out. They added image stabilization to both of those, but those are limited to f2.8, which is unbelievably close for a prime. Now at f2, this isn't bad, but it's nowhere near what we've come to expect, even from Canon's cheaper lenses, like the 85mm 1.8 and the 50mm 1.4, that both are going to go to a wider aperture. What do you get from this? Basically image stabilization. Canon has chosen to go this route, and that image stabilization is more important for it to add than a wider aperture, and it's charging a lot for that. You're talking almost $900 for this lens at the time of this review, and you're still going to roughly get about what you're used to with the 50mm 1.4 and 85mm 1.8. Nothing really better in terms of build, but you're talking double the price for an f2 lens. So when you pick this thing out of the box, knowing that you just paid that much for it, I will say it's a little underwhelming. It's about the same build quality as the 85mm. The 50 feels a little bit cheaper than the 35. The 85 feels a little bit better. It's a little bit lighter weight than the 85, not quite as lightweight as the 50 in the hand. The 50 is actually a little bit smaller even than the 35mm. The 35 is right in between what the 85 is and the 50mm is. So it's definitely a plastic. It's a good, it's not that it's bad feeling, it's a good feeling lens. Everything feels great about it. The focus ring does move pretty well. It's pretty tight, so if you're used to being able to do quick throws, you're not going to be able to. But it does feel good on this, and I guess the only qualm that I have with it is that I'm paying $900 for a lens, and this just doesn't feel like a $900 lens. And really that's due to the increase that's added from image stabilization. So Canon has now added a pinch lens cap to all of its lenses. This reminds me a lot of the Sigma. It looks extremely similar just in overall looks and the fact that it's thicker, and then you do have the pinch design to it. Thank you, Canon. Finally, this is finally a good lens cap that I can actually take out without having to pop off the lens hood. Unfortunately, Canon doesn't even include a lens hood. It's a $50 add-on in addition to the price of its lens. That's typical of Canon non-L lenses, but this is very rare that a non-L lens would be somewhere around the $900 range. Most of the primes coming from Canon in this category are below $400, and the 50mm you can even get for $350 now. But very rarely will you see anything like this for that high of a price. So overall though, the lens feels good in a hand, and if it wasn't for some of those issues with the lens hood, and then we probably wouldn't be having this discussion on there. But I'm glad to see they go with the lens cap. You can actually buy these lens caps for all of Canon's new lenses. This is the first one though that is getting this new cap design, and you'll see it a lot in the future though. All Canon lenses will be coming with this, so thank you Canon for that. Now we're going to check some of the performance of this lens. So the first test I'm going to do is a sharpness test. This is very important to any lens. If a lens isn't sharp, what's the point of it? So this is an f2 lens. Almost every prime lens from Canon right now, and even most of its competitors, looks good by about f2 and on. It's very tough to find a prime lens that still doesn't perform very well at f2. Therefore, I'm really expecting a lot. I don't think that we're going to see a lot of differences between f2 and f4 and f5.6, but we'll go ahead and test them just to see. Once again, making an f2 lens in this stage of time is not really a great feat from Canon, especially with a prime lens at f2 weight. But we'll go ahead and take some pictures. This is a Canon 6D we're mounting it to, so it's a full frame camera, 20 megapixels. And I will say this, the Canon 35mm f2 has a close focusing range of about 9.4 inches. That is better than the Canon 35mm f1.4L, which is 11.8 inches, and also the Sigma 35mm 1.4, which is also around that 11.8 inches. So we are going to get better close focusing distances on the Canon than any of the competitors. So when we take a look at these files, we'll shoot one at f2, and then we'll go ahead and put this up to f2.8. And then we'll go ahead and bring this to f4. We'll take a look at the results and see how we get. Now, in taking a look at the results of this test, it's pretty clear to see that even at f2, the Canon is very sharp. We can clearly see all of the text in this, even when viewed at 100%. Now, when we begin to up that up to 2.8, we do see that the results look very, very good as well, and almost no difference until we bring that up to f4. I do see a bit of sharpness increase at f4. Nothing considerable. Results still look good at f2. I'd have no problem shooting virtually anything on this lens at f2. But one thing that's also noticeable is the vignetting. It's pretty strong at f2, and it's very, very easy to see the differences when we begin to up that to f2.8 and then again to f4. You're definitely going to see some vignetting on this lens at f2, even more than I see typically on lenses at f1.4. It's going to be pretty considerable. Now, software takes out this without a big problem, and we should be able to see profile adjustments in Lightroom and things like that that will automatically remove any of that vignetting from this lens if you do like it. I like some vignetting in this in most of my shots. At f2 it looks a little strong. I'd probably recommend taking it out and then bringing just a little bit back in. At f2.8 and f4 it looks pretty good on that one. So I'm a little disappointed that we see that much at f2. That's not quite typical of this caliber of lens. Now here we'll take a look at one more sharpness test. We're going to just go ahead and shoot this brick wall. You're going to see two things. You're going to see the differences in sharpness, and you're also going to see that extreme amount of vignetting that we're talking about at f2 and even still at f2.8. So I'm going to shoot this first at f2, and we're going to go ahead and put this now at f2.8, and then we'll bring this now to f4. And as you can see on the results of those, even at 100%, the sharpness looks great across all three. At f2, everything still looks good. At f2.8, crystal sharpness. Even when we're going to f4, I don't really see any difference between f2.8 and f4. Everything looks great. What we can see is an extreme amount of vignetting at f2, and it's even still pronounced at f2.8, and it begins to go away by f4. If you're shooting at f2.8 or wider, this is a really large amount, and it seems to go all the way into the center of the lens. If you're shooting anything outside of the center of the frame, you're definitely going to want to take out that vignetting because it brings it in. It's not just on the outer edges at f2. At f2.8, it's a little bit more on the outer edges, but at f2, it's very much towards the center of the frame, and it really could impede your shots. Now, when it comes to focusing speeds on this camera or on this lens, one thing is pretty interesting. If we take a look at the lens, you can actually see that the infinity is very, very close in proximity to where you would normally focus at, say, 3 feet, 6 feet, anything like that. It seems like most of the focusing range is going to be on the close focusing end, from anywhere from 9 inches all the way to about 2.3 feet. And so if you are close focusing, you're going to have a much longer time focusing. So let me go to close focusing at 9 inches, and then we'll go ahead and focus, and you can hear the sound. And it took a decent amount of time, probably 3/4 of a second. But on the other hand, if we focus to infinity and then just do a focus on the ground, which is going to be about 2 feet away, and we take a look at those results, and everything is almost instantly. If I go 1, 2, 3, everything was very, very quick. But if I go the other end, 1, 2, 3, and on 3 is when I hit that button, and it took a good 3/4 of a second. So if you're close focusing, you're going to notice that this is a pretty slow lens to focus. But for normal use, and we're talking anything from 2 feet to infinity, everything was instant. This is a lot different than Canon's other cameras and even the other lenses by Sigma. And any other lens that I've ever used, actually. I've never seen that much of a difference on the close focusing for the long focusing for the telephoto end. So for most of your uses, this is actually going to make this a much quicker lens in focusing because the throw is so short between infinity and say about 2 feet. But once you start getting into the close-up ends, it's going to be a much longer focusing time if you're coming from infinity to get to something close. Now, one of the biggest reasons to get this lens is for the image stabilization. There really isn't another 35mm prime that adds this feature, and so you would be looking at a zoom lens like maybe Tameron's 24-70. It's an f2.8, not quite as wide as the f2, but you'll get stabilization on that. But this is one of the only, I think it is the only 35mm f2 image stabilized lens. So let's go ahead and take a look at the performance. And what I'm basically going to do is just shoot a little bit of video out here. And we're going to be recording this at a 30th of a second, and we'll start with the image stabilization off. Now, I will say I do not have the steadiest hands in the world, but I am going to try to be as steady as I can. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn the image stabilization on. And from my eyes right here, the results look very good. It almost looks like I'm on some kind of a glide cam. The results just look great as far as what I'm able to do, even with my unsteady hands. It seems to take the image and make it very, very still when you're using it for video. So for those of you that are using this for video a lot, you're really going to love that image stabilized feature. Now, is it enough to make you go for a $900 lens almost that's 35mm and that's it, versus getting something like the Tamron 24-70 that's going to give you a lot more zoom range, and you're only going to lose not even quite 3/4 of a stop on that. So it's very good at what it does. If you need image stabilization, it does work very well on this. This is a new technology from Canon, and it's very, very effective at what it's meant to do. Now, when we take a look at the results for the Canon in this bokeh test, we can see that although the rings are very round, everything looks nice from my perspective. When we zoom in, we begin to see some concentric rings inside those circles, not as smooth as I would have hoped. It's beginning to look a little trafficky inside of there, and so you're not going to see that unless you zoom in real close, but you are going to have that. And it seems to be pretty consistent across sharp lenses wide open. We tend to see these kind of results when we zoom in on those bokeh rings. So the biggest question now is this a lens that we should purchase? It's a lot of money. $850, $900 is not going to be an easy price to settle with for a 35mm prime that doesn't have the build quality of your top lenses from Canon and Sigma, both of which have a much better build quality, metal all around, larger, weightier, and open up to f1.4. We're going to be limited to f2.8. But we do get stabilization on this lens, and I can say that after using it for a bunch of things, the stabilization works well. I'm typically able to get probably 3 stops, in some cases maybe even 4. It worked very well for video from what I could see. I have very shaky hands, and this is something that really helped a lot for that. So when would I shoot with stabilization, I guess, is the biggest question, and are you going to be using it that much? Keep in mind that stabilization is not going to help you if your subject is moving. So if you're shooting still life or kind of a landscape scenery, 35mm is not super wide. It's not going to be a great indoor landscape lens or anything like that at 35mm. You might want to be at 24 or even wider for something like that. So can you justify the image stabilization? I do prefer the quality that I've been getting out of the Sigma 35mm f1.4. It is the same price as a Canon. We'll go ahead and put those two lenses up against each other too, because we really want to see the results on that. This is a high price to pay for a Canon lens. If you have the money and you need the stabilization, there's nothing wrong with this lens. It's great all around at what it does. You know the specs going in. It can close focus closer than any of the other 35mm lenses, and it does have image stabilization. If you can live with f2.0 as your widest aperture and you don't mind the $800, $900 price tags, this is a way to go for a Canon lens. If you do mind that kind of a price tag, or you're fine with maybe the f2.8 zooms out there, you might be tempted with something like a Tamron 24-70 that has stabilization built in. Or if you want to go prime and go wider, you're going to be very tempted at this price with the Sigma 35mm f1.4, all of which are incredible lenses. This is a new time in technology. Pretty much everything coming out is good. It's all about what do you need for your photography and will it enhance your skills for that budget.